either of those two dates in our upcoming event section on our homepage there, and you can register online, find out a little bit more about it. We have, I think, another session that's coming up for you for our Women of Grace foundational study in Spanish. That is September the 19th. And, it's interesting because when we do these in Spanish, we oftentimes pull a lot of people in from countries outside of the United States. We do that as well with the English version too. But it's always interesting for me to see where it is that people are coming in from. And that's one of the beautiful things about the online study is we do, anybody in the world can come and join us when it's online. And so that's always exciting for us. Also want to remind you that on October the 8th, Women of Grace is hosting an online rosary event. It's going to be taking place on October 8th. That's a Saturday. It's going to start at 10 a.m. in the morning Eastern and end at 2 in the afternoon Eastern time. It's the Holy Rosary and our journey towards salvation. I'm going to be one of the presenters, as well as Tom Sullivan is going to be one of the presenters. It's going to be a lovely time. We are also going to have a very special edition of our Rosary Crusade opportunity to pray the rosary together during that time period. But this is actually a free event. And boy, oh boy, would we love to have you join us for this. So that's October the 8th, a free event. It's a free online rosary event. It's going to be, a type of retreat. I'm going to be presenting. Thomas K. Sullivan is going to be presenting. I think you're going to really enjoy it. So please mark your calendars and join us for that. And then I have been telling you about our 20th anniversary pilgrimage to Mexico City. Women of Grace is celebrating its 20th birthday next year in 2023. So we're going to be traveling to Mexico City to the shrine, to the Basilica of Our Lady of Guadalupe there, with a lot of side trips also involved with that. That's going to be in December of 2023. So it's not too early to register, and it's not too early to begin to save your pennies and to join us for this marvelous opportunity. So I wanted to share all about that with you. Also, we do, of course, want to remember in a very special way the repose of the soul of Queen Elizabeth II. I was on my way into the studio yesterday when I heard the news on the radio. And, I have to tell you, it hit me very, very deeply. She's the only queen that I've ever known. She's been the queen throughout my lifetime. And to experience, her death, which we all knew would happen sooner than later. She's 96 years old. She was 96. What a beautiful thing. She was actually born a day before my father. In that very same year. So it was always easy to remember her birthday. And we do want to pray for the repose of her soul. And I just wanted to read this to you. My daughter, Jessica, sent me a text message right before I came on the air today. And boy, it's really beautiful. I believe that she's the one. She sent this to me, and I don't know who else she sent it to. But it's a statement that the Queen made, that the royal family apparently has put out. And it said, "The Queen exclaimed, 'How I wish that the Lord would come in my lifetime.' 'Why?' asked the chaplain. The Queen replied with quivering lips, and her whole countenance lighted up by deep emotion. And she said this, 'I should so love to lay my crown at his feet.'" Isn't that beautiful? Doesn't that show the deep faith, the deep love that Queen Elizabeth II has had for our Lord? And I think of that beautiful song that we sing, Holy God, we praise thy name. I think it's Holy God, or is it Holy, 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 Lord God Almighty? Yes, it's that one. And in that song, it talks about the saints all laying their crowns, right, at the feet of God. And we should strive to lay our crown at his feet every day. The crown that makes us a son or a daughter, a prince or a princess in the kingdom family of God. But also, too, the crown of our head, bowing our head in humility before him. What a beautiful way for us to honor our Lord. And I think the Queen gives us much to think about and much to consider by her own statement at this critical moment of her life when she was talking with her chaplain. What a beautiful thing. So just some thoughts for you to think about today. More to come on the other side of our break. I hear that music, so I know we're going out to the break right now. I do hope that you'll give us a call here, 833-288-EWTN. That's 833-288-3986. Maybe you have a particular memory about Queen Elizabeth II that you would like to share today, or something about, this great virtue of humility, and that we should all ask God to heighten in us, right? So that we might walk more closely to Him. Coming right back, 833-288-EWTN. Stay with us.
Do you Roku? Roku is a small black box that allows you to instantly stream EWTN to your TV. All you need is a high-speed internet connection, a TV, and the Roku player. For more, visit EWTN.com/Roku.
The most original Catholic content is on EWTN Radio.
Hi, I'm Prudence Robertson. Next time on EWTN Pro-Life Weekly, a Catholic nurse practitioner was fired from her job at CVS when she refused to prescribe abortion drugs. We'll speak with her lawyer. And I'll share my thoughts on President Biden's recent divisive primetime speech. Sunday at 10 a.m. and 8:30 p.m. Eastern, only on EWTN Radio.
Women of Grace is on YouTube. Search YouTube to find the EWTN YouTube channel so you'll never miss an episode of our show or any of your favorite EWTN radio shows.
In these challenging days, faith continues to remain a bedrock for many Americans as we look towards this year's midterm elections that will shape the future of our country. EWTN News and Real Clear Opinion Research are partnering together once again to survey American Catholics on key issues and questions such as: is the nation on the right track? Causes of inflation, confidence in the current administration, religious freedom, abortion, and their adherence to church teachings. And the results are now in. Visit EWTNnews.com/poll for the latest data analysis of the most recent survey. EWTNnews.com/poll, brought to you by Real Clear Opinion Research and EWTN News.
The Women of Grace phone lines are open. 1-833-288-EWTN. 1-833-288-3986.
Well, welcome back, everybody. I'm so happy that you were with us today. We're eager to hear from you. I'm going to give you those numbers again, even though you just heard them. Toll free for you here in North America. It's 833-288-EWTN. That's 833-288-3986. Available for you outside of North America as well. Just use the country code 1 and then these numbers, 205-271-2985. Country code 1, 205-271-2985. 2985. Also available for you through social media. I invite you to use EWTN Radio's YouTube channel and or Facebook page. Chat feature there for you. Jeff Burson, who is our social media manager and our producer, will dash right out there and retrieve your question or comment, and he'll put it up on the board, and I'll be able to receive it. We have Matt Gubensky on the phones today. Be sure to give him a big old howdy hey when you call in. Put a smile on his face and call with your question or your comment. If you're a first-time caller, as I mentioned to you before, or first-time submitter, let us know, and I will do this. Ring my little welcome bell for your debut here on Women of Grace Live. Well, I have a big old surprise for you. I sure do. I told you that Matthew Bunson is going to be with us today on EWTN Television for our 1-hour live show. That's at 1 p.m. Eastern Time. But he's actually in studio right there in the radio studio on the campus of EWTN. Hey, Matthew, how are you?
Good morning. It's great to be with you.
Well, thank you. I am so delighted. I'm looking forward to spending a good portion of my day with you. And
yes.
to start
You're
it off,
going to be sick of me by the end of it.
I don't think that's possible. I don't think it's possible. But I'm so happy that you could join us on radio too. And let's just talk about Queen Elizabeth for a moment. I mean, here you are. You're the executive editor of EWTN News. You're the Washington bureau chief, and so when these big moments happen, it's important to look at them in light of the history of the person who has passed. And
that's right.
What a remarkable woman.
Well, Queen for 70 years, I think 214 days. She is by far the longest reigning monarch in the history of England, Great Britain. Second is Queen Victoria, the great Queen Victoria, who stretched similar to Elizabeth into two different centuries. But Victoria was queen for 63 years by way of comparison. But Queen Victoria lived through the massive changes in England of the Industrial Revolution. I mean, England was largely a pastoral country at the time that she became queen. By the time of her death in 1901, I think, England had passed into the Industrial Revolution. It was now it is the greatest empire in the world at the time, and she presided over all of that. Queen Elizabeth II presided over one of the most shattering eras of change in human history in the 21st century. We can talk about the Second World War. We can talk about the massive cultural changes. But it's also striking to me that where we saw Queen Victoria preside over the emergence of the true British Empire, Queen Elizabeth presided over sort of the dissolution of that empire and the emergence of the Commonwealth. So two really notable historical epochs. And through it all, much like Victoria, Elizabeth was so committed profoundly to duty, to country, and to family.
Yeah, and that shines through, her entire legacy. And, Jack and I were talking about her passing last night a little bit, and he said it's quite remarkable that she could go 70 years without having anything tainted, with regard to the way in which she was ruling. And by that he meant personally,
Yes.
that she, when you think about the character of this woman, it's quite amazing. And I read a quote, I don't know if you heard it or not, but my daughter Jessica had sent this to me right before I came on the air. And apparently this was a conversation that the royal family overheard when Queen Elizabeth was speaking with her chaplain. And it says this: "The Queen exclaimed, 'How I wish that the Lord would come in my lifetime.' 'Why?' asked the chaplain." And they remark, "The Queen replied with quivering lips, and her whole countenance lighted up by deep emotion. And she said, 'I should have so liked to lay my crown at his feet.'" And what a beautiful, interior disposition of heart, which was really one of the things that guided her throughout that 70 years.
Oh, very much so. I mean, she was a genuine Christian monarch. And we can talk more in a little bit about now King Charles III, and is he going to be himself a Christian monarch? We are going to have to discover that, but there's some clues that I think we have. But Elizabeth was truly a Christian monarch, and I was struck especially by her use of that phrase of laying down my crown, because we have in the great history of Christendom similar monarchs. I went immediately when you read that to St. Stephen, King of Hungary, who on his deathbed lifted up his crown and handed it basically to the Blessed Mother.
Oh,
and he did so with his right hand, and it was that right hand that now is honored as the so-called Holy Dexter, which is preserved as one of the great relics in all of Hungary, in the Cathedral of St. Stephen, King of Hungary. And we're seeing then that she is one of those rarest of monarchs now who was genuinely committed to the understanding of the monarchy, but also what it meant to be a Christian monarch. And in that sense, while it was not perfect, and we can talk a little bit about that too, she held truly to tradition and understood the Christian roots of that monarchy, even as she welcomed, I mentioned the Commonwealth, welcomed into England a remarkable influx of people from all over the Commonwealth that literally transformed the political and cultural and social landscape of England, but she was always there.
Yeah, she, and it's interesting too, because when you look at the way in which the royal family plays out its reality there in England, it's very different from the way in which monarchs used to rule. I
Yes.
mean, the parliament, et cetera, the prime minister is really the ruling body.
Absolutely. We have Charles III who's coming in. We can go back to Charles I, who, as a result of the bloody English Civil War in the 1640s and the rise of Oliver Cromwell, they beheaded King Charles I and tried to establish a purely parliamentary government that, of course, sank immediately into the Lord Protectorship under Oliver Cromwell, which was truly one of the darkest days for Catholicism, and certainly for Ireland in certainly the last 500 years. And the church has suffered immensely in England, but the English understood they needed to have that stability of the monarchy, which is why you ended up with King Charles II, who came in. But throughout all of that was the great controversy of the close ties of the Tudors, of the Stuarts, to the Catholics. We had the wife of Charles I was Catholic. Charles II died without an heir, and so was succeeded by his brother James, who himself was Catholic, and that was itself enough to bring down his time as king and the institution of a whole different line. But at the heart of it was this anti-Catholicism. I mention all of that because in the time of the Queen, I think she was incredibly respectful of the Catholic faith, and she met 5 different popes on multiple occasions and understood, I think, the place of Catholics in the life of England and the role and place that they needed to have for the good of the kingdom.
Let's talk about those popes. Who were the popes that she met throughout her lifetime?
Well, she started before she was even queen, I think in 1951 with Pius XII, and then met John the 23rd, and then very famously several times with John Paul II, and then also, of course, Pope Benedict XVI, his very memorable trip to England, and then Pope Francis. So it has been quite a journey for her in meeting the popes. One can say that there was some controversy surrounding her meeting, especially with Pius XII, especially in the days of John the 23rd, when England still had very ambivalent opinions about Catholics, and Catholics were, as we all know, suffering from major disabilities in English life for centuries as a result of Henry VIII's break from Rome. But these were really diplomatic encounters between the Queen of England and the popes. But it had, I think, great significance in Christendom, in the idea of a Christian monarch meeting the leader of the Roman Catholic Church. And then we had the presence of papal nuncios to England who hold and have held for a long time great respect in the royal court. And then the presence of the archbishops of Westminster, and really the rise, I think, of the British episcopacy in the last 200 years or so. All of these things have played together, and all of them for 70 years were such a major part of her reign and her determination that Catholics should feel welcome, that Catholics should be lifted out of the disabilities from which they'd suffered for so long.
Again, that's a remarkable turn of events, and it's a remarkable way in which she opened up doors that had previously been closed to Catholics in her own country. And that's a sign of, I think that's a sign of a really magnanimous heart. Someone that really wants to do the best for God. And I think, probably because of her own strong faith, she had the courage and she had the I think, prudence to do that, because even in that diplomatic exchange, she's on the world stage.
Yes.
And so everyone's observing her every move.
Well, you mentioned that she was very keenly aware, as any monarch has had to be, especially in the last 200 years in England, of the role of Parliament, of the role of the Prime Minister as the real caretaker of government. But it is one of those realities. I think she lived through 15 different prime ministers, from Winston Churchill all the way to Liz Truss, that she met just literally 2 days or so before she passed. She has seen governments come and go, and that was a truly unique relationship, I think, that she had with so many different prime ministers. We start with Churchill. I think there was a providence at work that she ascended to the throne with such a towering figure as Churchill there to guide her. He had been ejected from office immediately after the Second World War, and had come back to power, if I'm remembering correctly, and so was there at the moment that she became queen. You can look at her relationships, especially with someone like Margaret Thatcher, all the way to, of course, Boris Johnson, Tony Blair, a Labour, who was there at the crisis of Diana's death. So that relationship, I think, was really quite something. But each prime minister soon discovered that she was not simply a caretaker, that she was not simply a figurehead monarch, that she actually understood government. How wouldn't she? But she was also a stern figure in giving them advice as needed and accepting their roles as prime minister. But any wise prime minister understood very quickly that you would come to her for advice as needed within that very complicated political system that they have. But she was such a figure in the lives of England and managed to remain in that role for 70 years. It's really quite something, and I don't think we'll ever see the like of it.
No, I don't think so either. And it's interesting to think back, to her upbringing and the way in which she was groomed for this position, obviously, from the time she was a child. It was, she was groomed not necessarily to be queen, but she was definitely groomed to be part of this royal family. And when, things transpired, such that they did, she had obviously she was thrust into office as queen into that position. Tell us a little bit about, that early training and how they began really to groom her. I would say that's the proper way to phrase it for this position.
Well, that's right. Now, it's always important to remember that it was not always assumed that she would be Queen of England because her father, the remarkable George VI, was himself not expecting to be king.
Right.
But because of the abdication of what many would describe as his worthless brother, Edward VIII, the famous abdication in favor of Mrs. Simpson, the monarchy suddenly went through a great crisis. And in some ways that foreshadowed some of the crises that would follow throughout the rest of the 20th century and into the 21st century. So suddenly we had her father coming to the throne in a way that had not been expected. And here she was then, in position now to become Queen of England. So you had all of these shattering changes that were taking place. And when she became Queen of England, here her father had died, I think everyone would agree, very prematurely, in 1952. She was then thrust into the monarchy. But you said something really important, that she was groomed for that position. She was groomed to be queen. And many are groomed or expected to become monarchs and fail horribly. Edward VIII, her uncle, was a perfect example of that, who was from the very beginning expected to become king. He did, but somehow was never either up to the task, not in any way to defame somebody, or did not want the job. And he abdicated in favor of what he described as love, one of those great stories of the 20th century. But here was Elizabeth, who understood from the very beginning what was being asked of her and the weight that was going to bring and the challenges it was going to bring. And she overcame all of them. Mm-hmm. And to become, I would argue, that certainly the greatest monarch in the last several hundred years.
Yeah. Yeah, the makeup of her personality obviously lent to that. But I think that the thing that has always struck me about her is just what you said, and that is that she had this understanding. She had this understanding of the duty of office, and also to be this queen of the people.
That's right.
Many would look at as a matriarch, almost in a familial way, that she was the mother of that nation. And she was able to ride, I think sometimes what some would say is almost a dichotomy, that maternal heart with what was required of her in tough situations. She was able to walk that with grace and with dignity.
Well, she became the mother of the nation, and then as the years went by, she became kind of the grandmother of the nation.
True.
And there's something, you also use the phrase that is always used, it's so commonplace now that we don't really give that much thought to it, and that is the concept of the royal family. Mm-hmm. It may be a royal family, but it is still a family, and we have seen also play out in the second half of the 20th century, and now certainly in the 21st, that the crises and problems that families face everywhere, so has the royal family.
Yeah.
And I know that's something we can talk more about, because I think it really has a lot of bearing on England today, but also families in general.
Yeah, absolutely. Friends, you're listening to Matthew Bunson. Matthew is the executive editor of EWTN News and the Washington bureau chief there for EWTN. He's going to be on our program, our live program, later today at 1 p.m. Eastern on EWTN television. We're happy to have him in studio with us right now. We are eager to hear from you, too. Let me give you the number. It's 833-288-EWTN. That's 833-288-3986. On the other side of the break, we'll continue our conversation with him. We want to have a conversation with you too, so pick up the phone and give us a call. Also want to remind you, you can use EWTN Radio's YouTube channel or Facebook page too. Coming right back. Stay with us.
Venerable Fulton Sheen, Teresa Tomeo, Jerry Usher.
The leading Catholic voices are on the largest Catholic media network in the world. You're listening to the EWTN Global Catholic Radio Network.
The most original Catholic content is on EWTN Radio.
This is Jack Williams. This Sunday on the Catholic Sphere, we go into the heartland with my panel of Catholic radio leaders and discuss the triumphs and challenges they faced bringing Catholic radio stations to rural America.
The Catholic Sphere, Sunday afternoon, 2:30 Eastern on EWTN Radio.
Archbishop Cordileone talks about the National Catholic Register.
The register's content is so critically important in the society we're living in now. There's an absence of the practice of religion in public life. So all the more important is it for people to be reading the register so that they can acquire more understanding of our Catholic faith. I've appreciated the catechetical benefits of the content of the register. It presents very clear Catholic teaching in a way that is easily digestible.
To get 6 free issues, order online at ncregister.com/radio or call 800-421-3230 and mention code radio. That's ncregister.com/radio or 800-421-3230 and mention code radio. Call or click today. The National Catholic Register. Read faithfully.
Hi, this is Dr. David Anders. There are a lot of misconceptions about the Catholic faith. We clear them up on Call to Communion, coming up this afternoon, 2 p.m. Eastern on EWTN Radio. Now, back to Women of Grace with Johnnette Williams.
Transforming the world one woman at a time. Let's return to Women of Grace with Johnnette Williams.
Welcome back, everybody. It's so good to be with you on this Friday in our Lord, and we're inviting you to give us a call here, 833-288-EWTN. That's 833-288-3986. We're happy to have in studio with us Matthew Bunson. He is the executive editor of EWTN News and the Washington bureau chief for EWTN. And we're talking about the passing of Queen Elizabeth II, and we're talking about her history. We're talking about the changes that we've seen take place within England during her reign. We're also talking about the way in which she, assumed that beautiful position with such grace. And I mean grace on the exterior and grace on the interior. She's a very deeply religious woman, and her religion factored very much into the way in which she presented herself as queen. We are looking forward to seeing what you think about Queen Elizabeth, so do give us a call, 833-288-EWTN. When we went to that break there, we were talking about Queen Elizabeth, and we were talking about the fact that she obviously assumed this position from her father, who only came by this tangentially because it was his brother Edward who was the king, but he abdicated because of his love affair with Miss Simpson. And so here, her father finds himself in this unusual position, but she too finds herself in this unusual position, and she's really groomed for this role. And she was born in 26. She assumed the throne in when she was 26. Her dad came in the 30s sometime.
In 1936.
36. Oh my goodness, those sixes. So, it's interesting. It's interesting to think about the fact that during her formative years, so she was 10. So during her formative years, all the way up through her high school years, if you would, her teenage years into her young adulthood, she's had the opportunity to observe her father. So, share with us, from your perspective, Matthew, that tutelage or what it was that she gleaned from him and how similar her reign was or was not to her father's reign.
Well, it's really remarkable to look back on all of that. It's hard for us, here we are in 2022, to think back on just how massive a constitutional crisis it was in 1936 when her uncle, Edward VIII, was demanding the right to marry a divorcee, Wallace Simpson, who also had the deficit of being an American. And the abdication that followed, and then the succession of her father as King George VI, he undertook to essentially stabilize the monarchy after this time of deep crisis. He himself then assumed the great burden of the monarchy. As Hitler had just been rising in Germany, we saw Japan sinking into fascism. We have the Soviet Union on the march. We had Benito Mussolini. We had the Great Depression that the world was still trying to recover from. And then we have this constitutional crisis in England where her father then has to assume the throne. And it was often said that he died around 56, I think, much earlier than he should have. He was a chain smoker from the stress, and then partly because he was also having to be king in the middle of the Second World War. So he was king of England as the Luftwaffe, the German Air Force, was bombing whole parts of England, especially the bombings of London, the terrible prospect that was hanging over the island nation for several years of possible invasion by the Nazis. The question was asked, should Elizabeth and her sister Margaret be sent to Canada? They stayed. Elizabeth suddenly goes from being just a possible heir to the heir to the throne, with everything that brings. And I think she had that opportunity then to watch her father serve as king in some of the darkest times in modern British history of this constitutional crisis, and then the Second World War, and then the aftermath of it. And sure enough, that stress killed him. She then understood that he had given his life in service of the crown, in service of the empire.
Wow.
And that was something I think that she really took to heart, and that's one of the reasons why she could have gone two ways. She could have rejected all of that, having seen her father die because of it. But instead, she embraced that same sense of duty and the sacrifice that was actually being made. It's people can be very dismissive of the monarchy. Well, what do they suffer? These are immensely wealthy people. They have no connection or possible way of understanding what the average person is going through. She suffered immensely over the decades in what she was asked to give up in return for the monarchy.
Well, we talked also prior to the break there about the whole concept of royal family and what that means.
Yes.
And you put emphasis on the word family. I mean, just look at what she's experienced within that family relationship, as it's gone on through the years. The effects of the divorce of Prince Charles and Princess Diana, the tenuous times that led up to that, then the death, the horrible, horrific death of Princess Diana, coming back together again, Prince Charles and Camilla, which apparently was a relationship that never quite ended.
Correct.
And all of this now in the public eye. And another thing to remember too, and obviously her father experienced this because, he radio, certainly at that time, the time of his reign, was a public form of media, of communication.
That's right.
But we're living in a completely different age of communications today, where everything is instantly communicated, and all of the dirty laundry is hung out for people to see. And so she had to make her way through all of those difficulties and trials, and then obviously with what's happened with Prince Harry.
That's right.
So she suffers as a mother for her nation, yet she has a duty of office that she must maintain, and at the same time she suffers for her family, and yet she has a duty of office that must be maintained.
Right.
That takes an incredible, here's the word, chutzpah,
Yes,
to be able to manage that.
Fortitude would be another word there. But it is that commitment to duty.
Yes.
But that idea of family again. Her 70 years on the throne witnessed the transformation of England, but also the transformation of the world.
Yes.
She went from assuming the throne in 1952 with the most of the British Empire still intact. That fell apart and was replaced ultimately by the Commonwealth. But that was just the tip of the iceberg in terms of the huge cultural changes that took place in England. But also the impact that all of that has had on families. And the royal family itself has become almost a microcosm of the problems of the modern world.
That's right.
Charles, her son, married Diana. One of the fairy tale weddings I can still remember watching, I'm sure you can too, was in 1981.
Yes.
One of the greatest weddings. And then from there, in 1997, Diana's death. And in between that, this catastrophe of a family life, of divorce, of upheaval. And then when we look at now the problems facing Prince Andrew, with his great controversy swirling around him over sexual scandals. Then we look at Prince Harry. All of these things are problems that families have on a regular basis, not on this scale. Right. But families face children who are such crushing disappointments, who leave the faith, who make such terrible decisions. But then also within the family, you have members of the family who are so stable and strong. I think, for example, of Prince William, who is now going to be the Prince of Wales, we assume, will be succeeding to the throne of England upon the presumptive death of his father, whenever that happens, Charles III. So he has been held up in a way as a great role model for stability, and certainly in comparison to other members of the royal family. In that sense, too, the royal family is that microcosm of what every family goes through.
Yeah, it's very true. Let's go to Tony. Tony is with us out of Easton, Maryland today. Good morning, Tony. How are you?
Fine, thank you. Thank you for taking my call.
You're welcome.
I just had a question regarding Prince Philip being born and raised Eastern, I guess Greek Orthodox. And do you feel that may have had any type of impact in how the Queen treated Catholics and in the family?
Yeah, actually, that's a really great question. Prince Philip was always very sympathetic to the Orthodox. His relationship with his mother especially was of great interest, given her obvious close connections to Orthodoxy. We can see that playing out in a lot of ways with the deep respect that Queen Elizabeth has expressed toward Catholicism, toward the Orthodox churches. As I was mentioning earlier, she visited with 5 different popes. And I think there is that strength of relationship that we have seen on the part of the royal family with the Catholic Church. She cannot be unaware, or was not unaware, of the crisis within the Church of England that has played out over the last decades. And the departure, including one of her one-time chaplains, Dr. Gavin Ashenden, he swam the Tiber, as the saying goes, left the Church of England because he simply could no longer remain in good conscience a member of the Church of England, precisely because it had abandoned so many of the central tenets of what the Church at least had always proclaimed from the time of Henry VIII. So in her reign, we're seeing that stressors, stresses that have been placed on the Church of England, how it in many ways had collapsed in whole areas of belief and is now itself bitterly divided. And I think she would continually see that the Catholic Church as similar to herself, a great model of stability and clarity at a time when there really isn't any in so many places of the world.
Mm. Yeah, very good response there, Matthew and Tony. Thank you for your question. We invite you to give us a call too, 833-288-EWTN. That's 833-288-3986. We have a question from Michael out there on YouTube, and this is something we were pondering prior to the break or beginning to think about. He wants to know just how Christian will Charles III be? And that's a good question, Matthew.
Yeah, it is.
What inklings do we have here?
Well, we know in Charles's background that he is respectful of the Church of England. He is respectful of the Catholic faith. He has expressed, however, publicly a desire less to be given the title of defender of the faith, which was one of the ones, Defensor Fidei, which was actually granted to Henry VIII, ironically, at one point. And really sees himself more as defenders. He's used the phrase defender of faith or defender of faiths. So he thinks very much, I think, less in terms of being a kind of Christian monarch as he does simply a monarch who is in a position to try to defend the faiths that are in England. Mm. That's a small indicator, too, of some of his intense interests. He's has expressed, for example, the idea that we need to launch a World War II-style campaign on the issue of climate change. Mm. And from that sense, I think he has really attached himself over the years to a number of fairly progressive causes that we see also with other members of the royal family. Prince Harry and Meghan Markle in particular, I think, are considered by far two of the most woke members of the royal, though I guess it's a question, are they still part of the royals? Charles himself does see himself very much in that similar mold. And if that's the case, then I think we're going to have something of a less amount of stress or emphasis on the idea of a Christian monarchy and more of a secular monarchy that tries to embrace what is certainly a more diverse England. Whether that will succeed or not and what the long-term ramifications would be for that, we'll have to see.
Yeah, this is a funny little thing, but, as I shared earlier, it was when I was driving into the studio yesterday for production that I heard on the radio that she had passed away, that she was no longer with us. And, my interior sense, my immediate response, I was deeply saddened by this. It affected me quite deeply, and I was surprised how deeply it affected me. But the other thought that I had in my mind that it just bubbled up within me was, in some way, I just felt like, some kind of another pillar, another key individual upholding Western civilization was now gone. I mean, it was a shattering interior, sense, and it was just like, oh my gosh, another foundation piece, another block in the structure has been removed, and it's teetering, and has, some would say it's already met its demise, but she was that kind of a stable force in the world and in culture.
Well, that's right. And right at the very start of our conversation this morning, I think this is the end of an epoch. Mm-hmm. Pope Francis uses that great phrase that we are not living in an era of change, we're living in a change of era. And we have just witnessed the end, truly, of an era in England. Mm-hmm. And you're absolutely right. I think she represented that stability, but also continuity and tradition.
Yes.
And I think one of the great fears now is going to be, one of the questions would be, can the monarchy survive in this new world without her there? But the other question would be, let's assume that it does, because I think it will. What is it going to look like by the time we're done? We have Charles, who has had a very difficult, checkered life, I suppose we could say. There was the scandal and controversy surrounding Diana. There is still the swirling controversy that in some quarters relating to Camilla, who is now going to be a major figure in the monarchy. Yeah. So all of these things are going to be playing out in what you said very significantly, Johnnette, and that is this 24/7 social media-driven life cycle of news.
That's
where
right.
Everything is now amplified.
Yeah, heightened and ratcheted up to degrees that never existed prior to this time. I want to get to Stephanie. She's a first-time caller, but I do want to ask you this just very, very quickly because we've only got about 5 minutes left here, and I do want to get to our callers. But I heard yesterday also on the news that the title for Camilla is going to be Queen Consort.
Yes.
Can you explain that?
Well, it's a way of recognizing her position as that she is married to the king, but it has a qualifier of consort. In other words, that we need to have clarity as to what her position is. And some were surprised, actually, that she was going to receive the title Queen Consort, given their whole history. But this is essentially a way of expressing that she is married to the King of England, but with very limited status, relatively speaking, within the monarchy itself.
It's like the title Queen with an asterisk.
Oh, there are a lot of asterisks here.
Let's go to Stephanie. She's a first-time caller in Wichita, Kansas, and we're ringing our bell for Stephanie today. Good morning, Stephanie.
Hi.
Hi.
This is Stephanie Mann. I used to write for you with the Catholic magazine.
Hey, Stephanie. How are you?
Just fine. Well, you just spoke about her as a defender of Western civilization in a way. But on the other hand, she was kind of as Newman would put it, a weak breakwater, because under her reign, England instituted abortion, same-sex marriage, and many other things that we as Catholics would say are in the reverse of the achievements of Western civilization. I know that she is a constitutional monarch, but she didn't do what other monarchs did do, Catholic monarchs or those who believed in Western and Christian morality resign for a time at least, or abdicate or whatever. Those things went on in her reign. So she's I think a weak breakwater for Western civilization in our age.
Yeah, I think you make a very interesting point. What you're specifically talking about, too, is the fact that all legislation must essentially pass to her, and she must give what's termed royal assent to that legislation. And she did. She actually assented to things like the legalization of abortion and same-sex marriage. Edward Penton has a beautiful reflection on Queen Elizabeth that I would encourage everyone to read at ncregister.com. Basically, it's a tribute to his queen. He said that her humanity, as he writes it, was not spotless. Successive governments passed legislation clearly contrary to the natural law, such as legalized abortion and same-sex marriage. The Queen gave royal assent to each of them. But he made an interesting point, and I'd love to hear what you think, that she really placed the importance, he writes, on the loyalty to the democratic will of the nation above the natural law. She acted as she thought best and in accordance with the Anglican and monarchical tradition in which she was steeped. So I think she was very much cognizant of the process of law and tradition in England. I agree. I think those would have passed anyway, but she might have made an interesting gesture, as we have seen with other monarchs. I think, for example, in Belgium.
Mm-hmm. Yes, that's who I was thinking of.
Yeah,
monarch there. Yeah,
yeah. Well, go ahead.
I mean, that is true. She had to hold up that she had a certain constitutional and position, and that will also hold true for Charles III. I mean, he's going to probably have to let go some of his own pet theories and ideas, because now he has a different role.
Right.
And so
what worries me, as we have seen in the history of Charles, that he may not be willing to.
Yeah, and of course, all of these things remain to be seen. I want to try to get to Champa in Bethesda, Maryland today. Hello, Champa. How are you?
Oh, hello, Johnnette. How are you?
Well, thank you. So what is your question, dear?
Yes. I wondered if there's any significance, or if there's probably an opportunity to explore her passing, the Queen of England's passing on the birthday of our Queen, Blessed Mother.
Yeah, it was a striking moment yesterday, wasn't it? I'll leave the final word on that, again, to Edward Penton and his beautiful reflection. He wrote that Queen Elizabeth, like a mother and grandmother to millions, And so it seems fitting that she should have passed on the feast of the Nativity of our Blessed Mother, the Queen of Heaven. But then his final epitaph was, "May she soon be welcomed into the heavenly kingdom and behold the face of God." So in that sense, I think, as Johnnette, you and I were talking about the Queen as a mother, as a grandmother, there was something fitting, perhaps, is a good word. Apt is another word. But I think perhaps providential, that on that day she would pass on, as you just noted, Champa, on the birthday of our Queen, of all of our, for everyone.
Yeah, I couldn't help but think about that same non-coincidence. I don't think it was by coincidence. And my thought was that the Queen passes on the birthday of the Queen, right? So who knows how these things work out in eternal life, but my personal opinion is that that's a little sign to us. And, we really, really are grateful for your time with us today, Matthew, and I'm looking forward to being with you in just what is going to be 2 hours, right? We're going to be going live on television. So we'll continue our discussion over there, friends. I'm sure we'll talk about the Queen in light of our discussion. For the live show on EWTN television, Women of Grace, at 1 p.m. this afternoon, join us there. Do call us in with your questions, just as you've done today. Sorry we couldn't get to all of you. Questions came late, but boy, oh boy, did they come in. It's been great, Matthew. God bless all of you. Bye now.
The most original and exclusive